Welcome back, and in this demo lesson you're going to get some experience using the S3 static website hosting feature which I talked about in the previous lesson. Now to get started, just make sure that you're logged in to the management account of the organization and that you're using the I am admin user. So this just makes sure that you have admin permissions over the general or management account of the organization. Also make sure that you have the Northern Virginia region selected, which is US-East-1. Normally with S3, when you're interacting with the product, you're doing so using the AWS Console UI or the S3 APIs. And in this demo lesson, you'll be enabling a feature which allows S3 to essentially operate as a web server. It allows anybody with a web browser to interact with an S3 bucket to load an index page and load pictures or other media that are contained within that bucket using standard HTTP. So that's what we're going to do, and to get started we need to move across to the S3 console. So either use S3 in recently visited services, or you can click on the services drop down, type S3 and then click it in this list. Now that we're at the S3 console, we're going to create an S3 bucket. Now, if you chose to register a domain earlier in the course, like I did, so I registered animalsforlife.org, then we're going to connect this S3 bucket with the custom domain that we registered so we can access it using that domain. If you chose not to use a domain, then don't worry, you can still do this demo. What you need to do is to go ahead and click on Create Bucket. Now for the bucket name, if you are not using a custom domain, then you can enter whatever you want in this bucket name as long as it's unique. If you did register a custom domain and you want to use this bucket with that domain, then you need to enter a DNS formatted bucket name. So in my case, I'm going to create a bucket which is called Top 10. It's going to store the world's best cat pictures, the top 10 cat pictures in the world ever. And it's going to be part of the animalsforlife.org domain. And so at the end of this, I'm going to add dot and then animalsforlife.org. And if you've registered your own custom domain, then obviously you need to add your own domain at the end. You can't use the same name as me. Once you've entered that name, then just scroll down and uncheck block all public access. This is a safety feature of S3, but because we're intentionally creating an S3 bucket to be used as a static website, we need to uncheck this box. Now, unchecking this box means that you will be able to grant public access. It doesn't mean that public access is granted automatically when you uncheck this box. They're separate steps. You will, though, need to acknowledge that you understand the risks of unticking that box. So check this box just to confirm that you understand. We'll be carefully configuring the security so you don't have to worry about any of those risks. And once you've set that, we can leave everything else as default. So just scroll all the way down to the bottom and click on Create Bucket. Now you might receive this error if you try to create a bucket that's called the same as another bucket within AWS. In this case, this bucket already exists, so top10.animalsforlife.org already exists. So I'm going to use a slightly different name. I'm going to call this one another top10.animalsforlife.org. You might face this error if you're using S3 in production, and that's fine. Every single bucket name needs to be unique. So scroll down and then click on Create Bucket to create the bucket. So the bucket's been created, but right now this only allows access using the S3 APIs or the console UI. So we need to enable static website hosting. Now to do that, we're going to click on the bucket. Once we have the bucket open, we're going to select the Properties tab. On the Properties tab, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and right at the very bottom we've got Static Website Hosting, and you need to click on the Edit button next to that. It's a simple yes or no choice at this point, so check the box to enable static website hosting. There are a number of different types of hosting. You can either just host a static website, which is what we'll choose, or you can redirect requests for an object. So this allows you to redirect to a different S3 bucket. We'll be covering this later in the course. For now, just leave this selected. So host a static website. Now, in order to use the static website hosting feature, you'll need to provide S3 with two different documents. The index document is used as the home or default page match for the static website hosting. So if you don't specify a particular object when you're browsing to the bucket, for example, winky.jpg, if you just browse to the bucket itself, then the index document is used. And we're going to specify index.html. So this means that an object called index.html will be loaded if we don't specify one. Now, the error document is used whenever you have any errors. So if you specify that you want to retrieve an object from the bucket which doesn't exist, the error document is used. And for the error document, we're going to call this error.html. So these two values always need to be provided when you enable static website hosting. So now we've provided those, we can scroll down and click on Save Changes. Now that that feature's enabled, if we just scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see that we have a URL for this bucket. So go ahead and copy that into your clipboard. We're going to need this shortly. So this is the URL that you'll use by default to browse to this bucket. Now next, what we need to do is to upload some objects to the bucket which this static website hosting feature is going to use. Now to do that, scroll all the way to the top and just click on Objects and then click on Upload. So this is the most recent UI version for S3, and so you have the ability to add files or add folders. Now we're going to use both of these. We're going to use the Add Files button to add the index.html and the error.html, and we're going to use the Add Folder to add a folder of images. So first, let's do the Add Files. So click on Add Files. Now attached to this video is a link which downloads all of the assets that you'll need for this demo. So go ahead and click on that link to download the zip file and then extract that zip file to your local machine. And you'll need to move to the folder that you extracted from this zip file. It should be called static_website_hosting. So go to that folder. And then again, there should be a folder in there called website_files. So go ahead and click on there to go into that folder. Now there are three things inside this folder: index.html, error.html, and img. So we'll start by uploading both of these HTML documents. So select index.html and error.html, and then click on Open. And that will add both of these to this upload table. Next, click on Add Folder, and then select the img folder and click on Upload. So this has prepared all of these different objects ready to upload to this S3 bucket. If we scroll down, we'll see that the destination for these uploads is our S3 bucket, and your name here will be different. As long as it's the same as the name you picked for the bucket, that's fine. Go all the way to the bottom and then go ahead and click on Upload. And that will upload the index.html, the error.html, and then the folder called img, as well as the contents of that folder. So at this point, that's all of the objects uploaded to the S3 bucket, and we can go ahead and click on Close. So now let's try browsing to this bucket using static website hosting. So go ahead and click on Properties, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and here we've got the URL for this S3 bucket. So go ahead and copy this into your clipboard, open a new tab, and then open this URL, or click on this symbol to open it in a new tab. What you'll see is a 403 forbidden error, and this is an access denied. You're getting this error because you don't have any permissions to access the objects within this S3 bucket. Remember, S3 is private by default, and just because we've enabled static website hosting doesn't mean that we have any permissions to access the objects within this S3 bucket. We're accessing this bucket as an anonymous or unauthenticated user, so we have no method of providing any credentials to S3 when we're accessing objects via static website hosting, so we need to give permissions to any unauthenticated or anonymous users to access the objects within this bucket. Okay, so this is the end of part 1 of this lesson. It was getting a little bit on the long side, and so I wanted to add a break. It's an opportunity just to take a rest or grab a coffee. Part 2 will be continuing immediately from the end of part 1. So go ahead, complete the video, and when you're ready, join me in part 2.